Thank you everyone for being here today. I'm really excited to have this talk about Ayurveda with you. It's something that I'm super passionate about. It's a practice that I use in my life, and I love being able to share it with others. And what I love about it so much is that even if you know about Ayurveda already, there's always something more that you can learn, because everybody is going to come to it with a different perspective. And that's because just as we are all individual in our constitutions, we are individual in the way that we learn things and the way that we share what we learn with others. And so I'm excited to drop into this today with you. I just want to start by asking that question of, do you know what Ayurveda is? Do you know what it means? I know we were talking earlier about how do you even say the word? So I'd love to know about what your connection is with it and what brought you here. What sparked your interest?
I'll start. I know nothing about it. And I do not know how to pronounce it. Did I say it right when I introduced you?
How do you...
I said Ayurvedic. Is it Ayurvedic?
Okay, very close. Ayurvedic. Yeah.
Thank you. And I just heard about your journey with it, which sparked my interest because I know what a lovely soul you are. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jamie.
You're welcome.
Would anyone else like to share?
Well, it's not an English word, is it?
No, it
What
is not
is
an
that?
English word. So Ayurveda, it is a Sanskrit word. It originates in India. It's a 5,000-year-old practice. And
Okay.
we say 5,000-year-old, it may have been around even before then. And so yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Well, I was in my enhanced fitness class next door here with Gina, the instructor, and she mentioned that they're starting a wellness educational classes. And I noticed today in the paper that the Y had an article about educating active older adults on staying social, being tips on how to be well and be healthy. So this is, they weren't sure exactly what you were going to talk about today. Somebody said something about yoga, but
Or yogurt, one of those.
yogurt, yeah, either yoga or yogurt. So, but yeah, I think it's a medicine, a healing. It's not just yoga, Ayurveda. I think it has to do with medicine, maybe of the mind and spirit and other things. So, and herbs or whatever. But so yeah, it has some credibility, but I didn't know how to pronounce it either. So anyway, that's nice that you came today.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And you are very spot on with what you're thinking it's about. So we'll talk about that. You got 2 of the really important parts of it, the mind and the spirit. So we'll talk more about that. And what was your name?
Paul.
Paul. Thank you for being here, Paul. And thank you, Carolyn, for sharing as well. And would anyone else like to share?
I downloaded a book, and you probably know the author's name, it's not coming to me, but on Ayurvedic, close, huh? So I did start implementing it last winter, and some parts of it. Anyway, I found it very helpful. I've since then gotten a bit off track, and so I heard about this and I thought, oh, this will get me back inspired, because I was just doing it on my own. So anyway, I was very interested in hearing more about it.
Love it.
Getting re-energized.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And it's kind of great because it is something that once you really can grasp what it's all about, it is something you can do on your own. So I love that that's something that's the first way you approached it. Awesome. And can you remind me of your name one more time?
Rainy.
Rainy. Oh, yeah, what a beautiful name. Thank you. And did you want to share?
So, yeah, I'm Leslie, and I have dabbled in Ayurvedic kind of stuff for the last couple of years. I've done some different kinds of massage, using Ayurvedic techniques. Or I haven't done it. I mean, I had it done to me. So, and
Even better.
And kind of had, looked at, what my doshas are and things like that. some different types of herbs and stuff to, or herbs or stuff like I can't even pronounce that.
Ashwagandha.
Which is good for me, and things, but I don't do it all consistently. But I certainly dabble in it, so and I'm here just to refresh, a little bit.
Thank you for sharing, Leslie. And did you want to share?
I'm
as well?
Carol.
Carol.
I don't think I'm a kapha. I think I'm a pitta vata, so I have trouble with the heat in the summer.
Me too.
And, a lot of trouble,
Yeah.
especially with the smoke too.
That makes sense, definitely. When you have that excess pitta in the body, you don't do well with heat. And smoke can aggravate kapha as well, so it's kind of interesting. And we'll talk about the doshas and how they show up in the body.
Do we all have some kapha then? 'Cause,
Me too, yeah.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, we'll get into that in just a moment. I want to thank everybody for sharing and being open to sharing. And, I love when we can just have real conversations about what we're learning, and helps us to really grasp it. So I encourage sharing throughout. Some information about me. My name is CJ. I come from Denver, Colorado, and I've been a yogi for 11 years of my life. I started practicing at age 16, and I loved yoga when I first found out about it. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that my favorite teacher in high school was teaching this class in the basement, and so I'm going to be there. And it totally changed my life. And when I moved out here, I ended up getting certified to teach yoga. And I had heard about Ayurveda, but I didn't know too much about it. I knew that it had something to do with the elements and my body, and that was really mostly what I knew. So when I came out here, I had actually moved from Denver with the hopes of learning more about Ayurveda. What is this beautiful knowledge? How can I implement it into my life? And I ended up working at a local herb company here called Banyan Botanicals, where I got an in-depth education on the herbal side, but then also on how we use Ayurveda for our mind, body, and spirit. And so with this knowledge, I was able to kind of go forth. I read book after book after book, and I'm still reading. I've taken courses with Maya Tiwari, who is a female practitioner that lives here in the States. She actually got cancer and cured her cancer through using Ayurvedic practices. My experience with Ayurveda is that I tapped into the wisdom of Ayurveda to help myself find balance and reach a place where I could feel lighter in my life, because I had a lot of heavy things happening. I was overweight. I had just lost my mother, and so I was deep in depression, and it felt like everything was just kind of weighing down on me. So what that looks like in Ayurveda, that's kapha. That is an imbalance of kapha. The qualities of that heaviness, that dullness, not really feeling super excited about life, and the depression and getting stuck in my emotions and where I was. So with my work with Ayurveda, it helped me to come out of that, to lose weight. I dropped deeper into my yogic practice, which is how you kind of balance out the body with Ayurvedic practice, because what's really beautiful about it is that, Paul, earlier you were saying, I think it has something to do with yoga, and it does. So the Vedic knowledge is a holistic knowledge. Ayurveda is where we go to figure out, what do we do with our diet? What do we do with our mental health? What do we do with our spiritual health? What are we made of? How do we know what imbalances are showing up in our body and what's causing them? And then furthermore, what action steps can we take to get ourselves back into a state of balance, that optimal state of health that we all are striving for. So for me, that looked like losing excess weight. It looked like coming out of my depression, but it's going to look different for different people. And that's because the biggest thing about Ayurveda is that no one is alike. So there's never any one size fits all routine. And that's what actually makes it really beautiful, is that it really celebrates the diversity in everyone. And the fact that even though we're all so diverse, we also are very connected by these 5 things. And so these 5 things are Pancha Mahabhuta. That's a Sanskrit saying for the 5 major elements. So I'll go ahead and write those down. So we've got the 5 major elements. Pancha, Maha, Bhuta. You don't have to remember the Sanskrit saying for it. Right now, we just want to understand what we're made of and what we're working with here. So the 5 major elements that are represented in Ayurveda are ether. Sorry, excuse me. So ether or space, it will also be called. Air. Fire. Water. And earth. So ether, air, fire, water, and earth. The 5 major elements that when combined make up everything. So you'll notice that these elements are represented in the world around us, in nature. They're also represented within us. And that means that when these combine, they create our own personal nature. So does that make sense so far? We kind of follow
Our own
the
personal
nature.
nature.
Mhm.
Okay.
The nature of who we are. And so when these elements combine, there are different ways that they show up in our body from birth. Now, what happens over time is that we end up having certain experiences, eating certain foods, doing different things in our lifestyle that will make these elements go out of balance from where we are when we're first born. And so there are 2 different things that you need to know. One is that you have your original nature from birth, and that's your prakriti. So the nature of who you are at your best. And then you have the nature of who you are after those life experiences that take place, and that's your vikriti. So that is who you are when you're not in alignment with that original nature. There are 2 things that are really important, and these key rules are really like the only rules that you will need to know to help you stay in balance. Okay, so 2 rules. One is opposites create balance.
That's true.
Yeah. See, it's totally innate. You're like, oh, right, that makes sense, right? So opposites create balance. The second rule is that like increases like. Makes sense. Right. So let's play with this. If I have a fire, there's a fire in my house, am I going to want to go and light a match and throw it into the flame to put that fire out? No, right? So what would I do to put that fire out?
Water.
Water.
That's the opposite.
Right. Now, it's interesting, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. So these elements, the whole dance of the doshas is that these elements have an affinity for each other, and I'll show you what that looks like. But before we get too far ahead, so like increases like. We wouldn't add fire to a fire to put it out. We would add the opposite of that. We would add water. Opposites creating balance. So if you're carrying a heavy load, are you going to add more bricks to your load to make it easier? Right. What are you going to do?
Remove.
You're going to remove. Right. So you're going to lighten the load. Hello, welcome. And so that's to say that if you're feeling heavy, you don't want to add on more heavy things. So when we're talking about optimal health and optimal balance in Ayurveda, we want to consider three things: mind, body, and spirit. When you can have your mind, body, and spirit in alignment, then this is what's going to help you stay overall in alignment. It's going to help you get back to that original nature, and help you to reach that optimal wellness that you're looking for. And so it shows up in a few different ways. And does anybody need a little bit more time with this before I flip it? Okay. And also, I just want to welcome our new friend. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I'm CJ.
I'm Cynthia.
Nice to meet you, Cynthia. And I've asked everyone else the question of, do you happen to know anything about Ayurveda? Have you ever heard of it?
Okay.
What's your experience with Ayurveda?
Oh gosh, for years I've been looking at it and listening to things about it, but never really delved into it specifically as a form of study or exploration. Just, I have a sense of it, I have a sense of what it's about, but I'm open to all new information about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. So these three things, mind, body, and spirit, when we can think about the fact that there are only two rules, that opposites create balance and like increases like, this is what helps us to find our balance with the mind, body, and spirit. So like we just had that example of carrying a heavy load. If you've got a lot of heavy thoughts going on in your mind, if you are in a place of depression, then you don't want to digest things that will trigger more of that depression. So you don't want to put yourself in heavy situations if you can avoid them. You want to try not to weigh yourself down with negative self-talk that's going to put you deeper into that place of depression. Instead, you want to try to look for lighter things. And that might mean meditation, lightening the mind by stopping the thoughts for a little bit. And I hesitated to say stopping the thoughts because technically meditation isn't just clearing the mind of thoughts altogether. It's more about watching the thoughts and seeing if you can put yourself in that space between the thoughts. But when we can work with that, it helps us to lighten the mental load. So there are three pillars of health in Ayurveda. And these pillars actually kind of represent the mind and body and spirit. So one is sleep. If you can balance your sleep, you can balance your life. And sleep, for me, is also a representation of how we take care of the mind. Then the next pillar would be digestion. So digestion is everything you take or you consume, everything you take in, and your elimination. So what are you putting out? Every time you take something in, we process. So if we're talking about food, we digest our food, we process the nutrients, and we eliminate the waste products of that food. So this is how we balance out the body. Just one way that we balance out the body is with digestion. And then the third pillar of health is vital energy. Sometimes you'll see it in textbooks as sexual energy. And I don't have anything against that term. It's just I like to put it in terms of vital energy because we want to look at the fact that it's not just about sex. It's actually about our overall energy. So Dr. Vasant Lad, in his textbooks, he refers to the fact that we are sexual beings because we have a reproductive system. And if you look at it from a yogic point of view, we have two different energies in our body. We have our masculine and feminine energy, and they come together in all of us to create who we are and how we function in the world. So vital energy is the spirit portion of health. And this can be balanced out in a few ways. Yoga is one of those ways. And yoga is more than just movement, right? So here in the West, we see yoga as what we call asana, taking poses and shapes, but there's a lot more to it. Yoga is also mantra. It is meditation. It is a path towards liberation of the spirit. So finding that freedom in ourselves by going inward first. And so we can use things like yoga and meditation to help with our vital energy as well. So we have sleep, digestion, and vital energy, the 3 pillars of health. Are there any questions so far? Okay, awesome. So how do you feel like you're doing in these areas of your life? Not sleeping.
Sleeping.
Okay. And so with your sleep, is it that you can't go to sleep, or do you go to sleep and end up waking up in the middle of the night?
Early.
You wake up early.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Anyone else want to share?
Well, if I don't sleep well or whatever, I'm a writer. And so I'm laying in bed thinking of how to write this story or that story. So I call waking up in the middle of the night a good thing, because I get to think. I mean, I'm retired now, and so I'm with my husband all the time. And so the only private time is when I'm in bed sleeping, and, I sort of have, 20 minutes, a half hour to think about my work. So I don't mind waking up at 3, but I'm worried that, why am I waking up at 3? But I notice it's a habit to sort of wake up and do my thinking for tomorrow. But I don't think you're supposed to do that. I think you're supposed to sleep through the night. Aren't you?
Whatever works.
Right, whatever works. So I love that that's your response to that, because the thing that I always teach my yoga students is to meet yourself where you are with compassion. And we're all on our journey, and certain things come up, and we're taught to be in the flow, especially here in Ashland. You hear that all the time, right? Like, be in the flow. I'm in my flow. And I think that we hear that so much, but we often don't stop to think about what that actually means. And so for me, what I've learned about being in the flow is that it means moving past the rocks as well as being in those places where everything's calm. So right now, at this time in your life, you might be waking up at an early time in the night and you're just like, what? It's 3 a.m. What's going on? But it might just be that the mind is working, right? And so like you said, you get your creative thoughts around that time. This is Vata kicking in. So this is where we kind of start to get into the doshas. The mind is governed by Vata, and Vata is creativity. And so I'll go ahead and start going into that, and you'll kind of understand that as we do. But before
How do
I
you
move
spell
on,
Vata?
Vata, and I'll put it up here for you as well too. Are we good on these notes, or do we need them further?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. All right. So the dance of the doshas. So let's first talk about what the doshas are. Dosha is a Sanskrit word, and essentially it means imbalance. It doesn't actually mean that you're in balance at all, but it actually means a fault. And so how I like to think of the doshas is, California sits on a fault line, and because of that, there's lots of earthquakes. It's constantly moving. That earth is shifting. That's what the doshas are doing in our body. And they shift based on the time of day, the time we're at in our lives, the season that we're in, the food that we're eating, the things that we're digesting. So this could be conversations that we're digesting, television that we're digesting, music, anything that we're taking in, digesting, will affect the doshas. And this is also with our vital energy. So, if you're going through a time in your life where you're being called to be a lot more active than you're used to, and you have to go pick up someone here and then go do work here and then go work on the computer here and jump back, and you're jumping from place to place in your life, that can be something that throws you out of balance as well. So it can aggravate vata, its movement, its transportation. So, yeah.
So is the function, if you will, of the doshas, in this case vata, is it to seek and maintain equilibrium, kind of for preparedness for the next experience or shift to evolution or whatever?
Exactly. That's a really beautiful way to put it, yes. So, exactly. For preparing yourself for the next experience. The fact that you're never going to be in perfect balance. That's just not something that exists. We want it, right? We really want it. But you can't be in perfect balance, but you can be in balance for who you are. So that's when we kind of go back to that original nature that we come into the world with. We have a certain measurement of the doshas in our bodies when we're born and when we're at our most optimal state. And those can shift, right? So we want to work back to our own equilibrium. And then we just kind of have to know that being in the flow means that we're going to go out of balance a little bit. But if we know how to maintain balance, then that's okay. Because we'll be able to see what's coming up in our bodies. We get to observe and say, oh, you know, I'm getting hot flashes now and I didn't used to. And I think maybe I'm eating spicier foods more often, or I'm working in a hot environment. So maybe I need to look at adding something that's the opposite of that to get myself back into balance. So we'll start with vata. And this is where we start to see the dance of the elements together. Vata is that love relationship, that love affair between ether and air. So ether is either space or ether and air. And these two love each other because air needs space to move through. And so they work together in that beautiful way. In our bodies, you see vata in the skin. It's in the nervous system. It's in the bones, because we have porous bones. It's in the orifices, so the nostrils, that space where you breathe in air. It's in the ears, that space where you receive air in the form of vibration, and you can then digest it into sound and something that you can understand. And so what's really beautiful about vata and the quality of vata is that it helps us pull information from the ether. It travels to us through the air on those waves, and then we're able to digest that information and put it out into the world. So you'll notice that people who have higher vata in their constitution, they're typically teachers. They're creative people, they're writers, they are painters, they're artists. And this is because they're really, you're probably noticing this in yourself, and you're like, oh, yeah, I have more vata. Okay. They're speakers. They love to communicate. If you know anybody who, you talk to them and it's like they're talking at a mile a minute, and it's kind of like, oh, but, okay, I can't really get a word in, but you're happy because you've got all of your thoughts out. That's vata. They're communicators, and we need them. We need that energy here because we need to be able to share information and receive information. So that's all of those things I just described. That's the nature of vata when it's in balance. But when it's out of balance, so I'll write that down just so you can kind of get that to take home with you. But so vata's nature is creativity, communication, it's detached. So a lot of times vata people, they don't get super stuck in emotions. And when I say vata people, I mean vata dominant, but I'll go back to that in a moment. But they're a little bit more detached. And they can be teachers. They pick up quick on information. and sometimes they can get a little bit ahead of themselves. So I have predominantly 2 doshas in my constitution, and one is vata. So sometimes when I'm writing, my hand is going faster than my brain is going, or my brain is going faster than my hand is going, so things get a little funny. So we have creativity, communication, they're a little bit more detached, they're teachers, they pick up information really quickly. And that's what the true nature of vata. And there's a little bit more to that. One is that they're also often cold. So they're the ones who, you're sitting in a room and everybody's hot, but this one person who's like, actually, I need a jacket. Or in the office, for me, when I was working in the call center at Banyan, I was the one person who was bundled up in my hoodie and everybody else wanted the windows open. And I was like, all right, well, I'll just put my layers on. It's excess vata, that's what happens. One of the qualities is cold. And then also, when you look at somebody and you see excess vata in them, you'll notice that they're tall and lanky, and they have long limbs. But don't let that fool you, because another element of vata is that it's totally unpredictable. So you might also meet people who are extremely short. And they're those little firecrackers who are really short and they're running around and they have a lot of energy and they're really mobile. And
Like Kevin Hart.
He might be vata, and that's the thing is, it's when you really start getting into the depths of Ayurveda, these are some things that kind of help you pick up on the elements and the doshas, but then you'll realize that everything you thought you knew, you don't really know. And we can't always look at people and assume what their constitution is, because they may not be in balance at the time that we meet them. But there are some things that you can kind of look at just based off of their structure. So that's vata and the nature of vata. But now we want to look at when vata is out of balance. So vata out of balance can look like anxiety, worry. Yes. So we've experienced some of these things. Anxiety, worry, it can look like forgetfulness. It can look like low appetite. And it can also look like light sleeping is a natural thing with people who have more vata, but if you can't sleep, if you have insomnia, that is also vata out of balance. So when it's in balance, you can get some sleep, but even a pin drop is going to wake you up. And so you kind of want to look at that and you think, well, I'm a light sleeper and I always have been, so that's okay, that's in balance. But I've usually been really good at getting all the sleep and now I can't sleep at all. That means that there might be something that you need to address. So that's vata. And well, first, are there any questions about that? Okay. Yes.
Sensitivity to noise, like I live right next door there, and there's like a 4-hour period on Fridays that they just are making all the loud noises.
Yeah.
And I don't function very well with all that going on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because if you think about it, air, right? So that noise is vibration. And when air is moving around all crazy, that's what that noise is, and that's why it affects you. It's that way that it aggravates vata sometimes.
Yeah.
So vata also shows up. There are different periods of life where we hit a certain age and then we're prone to imbalance in that place. And so the vata time of life is near older age. I believe it's 55 and older. It might be 65 and older, but there's a certain point where you hit an age where you'll notice that you go to bed a little bit earlier and you wake up way earlier, and you can't eat as much as you used to. Your appetite starts to go down. You get that lower appetite. Your bones might become a little bit more brittle. So this is Vata, kind of we're returning back to the elements is the way that it's described. And so because of that, we're lightening. And when we become lighter, we become a little bit more susceptible to certain things. So then let's look at, let's see, do we need the Vata notes still? No. Okay. So the next dosha that I want to talk about, and there are 3 doshas, so Vata is 1. The next one is Pitta. And Pitta is the love affair between water and fire. So this goes back to that analogy earlier about the fire in the house. So yes, you can throw water on a fire and it'll put the fire out, but you can't throw water into a grease fire, right? That's actually going to make it worse. And that's because that oiliness, that unctuousness, it actually feeds fire. It feeds Pitta. And so that will show up in our bodies as if we add spicy foods that have the elements of Pitta, water and fire, then sometimes it can increase, it can show up as acid reflux, it can show up as heartburn. So it's an interesting play between the 2 elements, but when you're looking at water, it's more about the oiliness that occurs. And that feeds the fire, so that's why they kind of love each other. When the true nature of Pitta is that Pitta is very passionate. They're very smart. They learn and retain information very easily. And they're also really good at conveying information. They're leaders. So a lot of times when you meet people who are entrepreneurs, they have a little bit of fire to them. They have a drive and a motivation, and they're good at putting themselves out there and telling people what they need and where to go and what to do. They might have more Pitta in their constitution. They tend to be managers. They're very sharp, so they have a sharp tongue sometimes, and that when in balance, they're very witty. They're usually comedians. They're really funny. So Kevin Hart, he may have predominant Vata, but he also might be predominantly Pitta as well. So they're sharp-witted, and they tend to have a sharp tongue. They are always hot. So if you are someone who all your life you've always been more hot-natured, then you probably have just always had a little bit of extra Pitta in you.
What if you used to be always hot, but now at a certain age, you're not as hot anymore?
Huh.
It's that hormone balance kind of.
So that might be, it's hormone balance, right? But it could also be that Vata is coming more into play in that colder nature. As you're getting older.
Moving into Vata.
Yeah, you're moving into the Vata stage. It's not always that, and this is really advanced Ayurveda because Vata has the ability to also push fire out of control. It can bully all of the doshas and make them all go out of balance. But that's kind of a lot to get into because it shows up in so many different ways. But that could be what's going on. So you're just having more of that colder element implemented into your life. Let's see. Pitta people also, they're the reason for the term hangry. So if you've never heard this before, it's when you get really hungry and you need food right now or you're going to be mad. They have very fast metabolisms. So typically they need to have their snacks, and it's good for them to have their snacks. And I like to think about it as, it's fuel for the fire, so it's kindling. So when you have a higher pitta constitution, if you eat heavy meals, that's actually going to dampen your digestive fire. So pitta is seated in the stomach, and those digestive fires are what help to transform. So pitta has transformative energy. They're really good at turning situations around. And it's the reason for digestion in our body. So you, instead of eating those heavy meals, you want to just eat lighter meals and eat more often in the day. And that will feed your digestive fire. When pitta is out of balance, and actually before I go into that, so pitta is transformative. Vata is transportation. When you think about how we receive that information, it's transported in through the waves of air, vibration. That's what Vata's role is to transport things. So it's movement, mobility. Pitta is transformative. It's transformational. So it takes things and it turns them into something else. It takes your food, it turns it into nutrients. When pitta is out of balance, then it shows up as broken sleep. Broken sleep. And so you might notice that you have no problem going to bed, but you wake up in the middle of the night and you find it hard to get back to sleep. And a lot of times you'll wake up and you're hot. I notice, you're like, yes, I've been there. And I've been there too. Whenever I have excess pitta in my body, and I tend to get excess pitta very easily because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm always on the go, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I realize like I'm sweating and I'm hot, and that's why I'm awake right now. So that's something that you might experience. It also can look like anger. So anger is an interesting energy because sometimes we need to get angry to make changes in our lives, right? Or sometimes we need to get angry to finally kick that person out of our lives, or whatever it is. We need anger to move us, and that's how it can be very transformational for us. However, it's like that saying that if you hold a hot coal, then anger is like a hot coal, and if you hold on to it, then you're only going to burn yourself, right? So anger, when out of balance, is something that people with predominant pitta or that have a pitta imbalance are prone to. That sharp tongue can end up being very critical of others and of the self. So whenever, being your own worst critic, that comes from having excess pitta in the mind. And then for digestion, pitta can show up as diarrhea. Diarrhea is, I don't think I spelled that correctly, I'm sorry. So diarrhea is when there's excess heat in the bowels, and so it comes out as diarrhea. If you have excess vata in the bowels, then it shows up as constipation. So it means that, that it's too dry to move through smoothly. Another thing that you might experience is heartburn or ulcers or indigestion. And inflammation. So those are all different symptoms of excess heat in the body, excess pitta. Hot flashes are another one, night sweats. And also breakouts. So if you ever are experiencing a lot of acne and it's very heated, very like red, or it's very painful to the touch and it's inflamed, then that's excess heat, that's pitta. And then we have kapha, which is what I said. And we love kapha. kapha is the mixture of water and earth. So that beautiful love affair between the two elements that when they come together, they make something that you can mold and build structures out of. You can also make mud. So adding water, adding water to earth can make that sticky, sludgy, hard to move through, sluggish mud happen in the body as well. It shows up as mucus in the lungs. I'll write those down in a moment. But the nature of kapha is love. Kapha is structure. So it's very loving and very, very much a lover of connection, bringing people together, bringing things together. You think about that and you think about the nature of kapha.
Okay, well, you have a lot of kapha because I came to this class, but I have to go now to my 1 o'clock class.
Okay.
So will you be here next week?
I won't. I don't
Or
think
is it just a
so.
one-time deal?
We will definitely have CJ back again,
Okay.
and I've got your name, Carolyn, so
Okay.
I'll
All
let
right.
her know, definitely.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thank you for
Thank you.
coming,
Thank you for being
Carolyn.
You
Hope you
all
learned
just
something.
learn everything you can. And when I see you on the street, I'll say, what else?
Yeah, share it. Tap into that vata, share the communication.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
know,
Lovely
you
to
should,
meet you.
Is your email on here?
It is.
Well,
in
I'll
the
get it
pamphlet.
somehow. Okay, bye.
Don't be late. Don't be late. She might have some pitta because pittas don't like to be late. They're very prompt, so it's good. 5 minutes early. So love lubrication of the joints, having a lot of unctuousness, having that thick and luscious moisturized skin that is just naturally that way. That is a kapha trait.
I would like that.
My son is
I would not
12.
like that.
He's just,
And also just more slow paced. Kaphas move at a slower pace. They take their time. They eat slower than anyone else. And where my kapha shows up is that anytime I go out to dinner with friends, I'm the last one with food on my plate because I'm still just savoring. I take my time. So it's interesting how the two dance together. Let's see, kapha also shows up as, I did say structure. And being very grounded in terms of your energetic, like your mind and your spirit. You can be very grounded, very devoted to your family, devoted to, your religious practices or any practices that you have. Kapha is devotion. And when kapha is out of balance, it can look like depression. So that devotion can start to be something that actually makes you feel a little bit more devoted to the negative thoughts and really connected. You can't get through it. You feel like you're stuck and you just can't move through what's happening. It can look like sluggish digestion. So when you eat a meal, it just feels like it's not being digested, or it takes forever. It can look like excess mucus in the lungs. And allergies, it's interesting that you mentioned that because allergies are actually a cause of pitta, inflammation. But what happens is because our bodies it's our body's nature to balance itself out. So the things that we do with Ayurvedic practices, they just help us to kind of aid our body in its natural way of healing. So when there's excess heat in the body, that love of water, the kapha element comes in to cool it down, to help things along. But what happens is we get inflamed, and then there's too much kapha that shows up. It's like overworking. And then we experience that sneezing as vata trying to move it all out. And so it ends up being these really uncomfortable, like sinus infections and sneezing constantly and just having mucus all over the place. So it's kind of interesting how that happens. But allergies are actually pitta to start with, inflammation. So, and then also it can show up as just not feeling motivated. And oversleeping. Or not feeling well rested when you wake up in the morning after a full night's sleep. So unfortunately, that's kind of our time today, and there's so much.
Let's
but
do, since we got started a tiny bit late, if everyone's open, maybe we can do like a 5-minute Q&A, and then we'll have you back at some point to do part 2 or continue, because this is fascinating.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fascinating.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yes,
And
you're welcome.
yeah, are there any
So I have a
questions?
question. In this flyer, it says to doing an Ayurvedic spring cleanse, but it doesn't tell you what to do.
Mhm.
So tell us about that a little bit.
So it doesn't tell you what to do because it's actually pretty in depth. There's a lot that comes with doing an Ayurvedic
So
cleanse.
it's having an evaluation and talking with somebody. about what
Right,
you would need to
right,
do.
right. No, you there are kind of some things that are general, like winter is represented by kapha. It's that cold sort of freezing of earth and water together, and it builds up in the body. It can be excess weight. It can be those colds that are actually coming from excess mucus and that kapha effect. And so when we move into spring, it's also sluggish digestion because we're building up during winter. It's that time where we retreat, we hibernate if we have the time to, but really it just means that we're collecting all of our resources and building up so that we can have the energy to move forward once spring comes. But we can accumulate too much kapha, and then in the springtime, it's a good time to cleanse it out so that we can get a digestive reset. And with the cleanse, it looks like, there's different ones. There's a 7-day Khichdi cleanse, but you have your pre-cleanse prep, your actual Khichdi cleanse, and then you have your rejuvenation. And yeah, so there's so much that goes into it, and I actually coach on doing stuff like that, and so that's why I have my information in the pamphlet, and you can reach out and set up a call, or if you want to learn more, we can do
See your
that.
information.
Oh, there's a website.
Yeah.
Email.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my website or my email. That's usually the best way to get me, and then we could exchange phone numbers that way and go from there.
Yoga.
Yeah, yeah.
So you'd recommend going to your website here?
I do.
Life Red Moon Yoga.
I do, yeah. And
Okay.
then you can, and you're right, I don't actually have my
Okay, join.
email here, but my email is lifebythemoonyoga@gmail. So with, let's see, yeah. Sorry about that. I thought I had put my email in here and I realized I didn't. But if you go to my website, then you can reach me.
Okay.
And yeah, so there's a lot to it. And I also have a cleanse series on my blog right now, so you can kind of learn some more stuff about cleansing the Ayurvedic way on my website.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I was most interested in the schedule, the get up with the sun. And
So following
don't
those
eat after
rhythms.
6 p.m. or
Right,
something.
totally. So you've got it. You're on it, and that's that's a big part of it too. I wish that we had more time today because I was going to kind of go more into that, but there's so much just in the doshas that this is like a lot more than just one talk. But yeah, so a big part of Ayurveda is routine and aligning with the natural rhythms. So like you said, it's very good to wake up in the morning with the sun or a little bit before the sun. And a lot of times at the Vata time of life, we naturally end up doing that. So,
Not me.
okay, so there might
I
be,
still sleep. This is my superpower.
so you might be more kapha dominant, or you might have a kapha imbalance. It depends on if that's something that's always been in your life.
I don't know. I was tridosic, however you say that, at one
Tridosic.
point. Now I think I'm more pitta kapha.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
I have the symptoms of being out of balance of all three.
Right, and that's because of being tridoshic. So
Yeah.
tridoshic people, they say that they're very rare, but I've been meeting more and more.
But
But
more things out of whack.
so exactly, that's what it means, is that your nature will be all of the things that are represented by all of the doshas, but it'll also be easier for you to go out of balance because you're like at this tipping point all the time. So yeah, it might be that you have more kapha now, and eating lighter or just sticking to those rhythms is really good. having maybe lighter meals or trying to set your alarm clock for earlier. And really with kapha, because it is that heavier thing, it needs some sharpness to get it out of its ways. So pitta can kind of help with that. If you are very firm with yourself, like pitta people can be, and you work with that fire in your body, then you can kind of push your kapha to get moving a little bit more.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Thank you.
CJ, how can everyone get a hold of you if they want to actually hire you or go to your, use your services, your coaching? Because that's certainly, we want to certainly give you that opportunity to tell everyone. Is it on your
Yeah,
brochure?
so you can go to lifebythemoonyoga.com, and it is on that that pamphlet. And I am also on Facebook under Life by the Moon Yoga if you do Facebook. But yeah, and I'm also I'm super open. So if you have a question, you want to shoot me a question, we can talk about it. I always do hour-long consultations with people before I meet with them. So if you just want to, or before I work with them. So if you just want to meet and talk, we can do that. And you don't have to worry about any other motives, but just want to get your questions answered. I'm free and open for that. So.
Thank you.
Very,
Very
good.
good.
Thank you. Do you have ongoing yoga classes?
I do. Right now, I only have a mama-baby yoga class in Ashland. My
Uh-huh.
other class is out in Central Point, and I work at the Anytime Fitness, so I do classes at
There?
9:15. No, it's out in Central
Central
Point.
Point,
Yeah.
okay.
So I have a 9:15 class on Saturday mornings out there, and then we're gonna have a Wednesday evening one. And hopefully, I'll be able to get some more classes here in Ashland as well soon.
Thank you again.